Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time, we really dug into that first huge question, where did I come from? Right? We saw everything started out good, perfect even, designed for connection.
Yeah, we laid that foundation of original goodness. But today, we have to pivot. We're tackling the next big one, maybe the toughest question for any worldview. What went wrong?
So we're looking at the sources, mainly around Genesis chapter 3,
Hmm.
to really, dissect how sin got into that perfect system. We'll definitely cover the consequences, the fallout.
Mm.
But we're also tracking something else, something really important the sources highlight. How grace and mercy show up almost immediately,
Mm-hmm.
like woven right into the bad news.
Absolutely. But first things first, before we even get to the garden scene, we got to be clear on what we mean by sin. Because just saying disobedience, well, that's just scratching the surface. It's way bigger than that Sunday school
Okay,
definition.
yeah, let's unpack that because the sources paint a much broader picture, don't they? If
Yeah.
it's not just like breaking a rule, what's at the heart of it?
Well, it's fundamentally about failing to value God for who he truly is. And it's comprehensive. The sources give some powerful examples, like sin is when the glory of God isn't honored,
Okay.
or uh, his holiness isn't reverenced. It's even deeper. It's when his promises aren't believed, like not trusting he's actually good.
Right, doubting his intentions.
Exactly. Or when his wisdom isn't esteemed, basically thinking we know better.
So it's less about a specific bad action and more about this internal posture, this rejection of God's entire character, his goodness, his authority, his wisdom.
That's the core of it, yeah. The big takeaway from these sources is sin is ultimately rebellion against God, and structurally, it's a reversal of God's intended order. The whole story in Genesis 3 is watching that perfect order get turned completely upside down.
Okay, if sin is defined by that reversal, let's trace how it unfolds. The serpent's approach in Genesis 3, verse 1. Pretty sneaky. What's the very first reversal we see?
The first one is about dominion. God put mankind in charge, right? Rule over the animals. But here you have an animal, the serpent, initiating, questioning, trying to lead the humans. The creature trying to steer the king, basically.
A total flip of the hierarchy. And the second reversal follows right away, targeting the human relationship itself.
Right, the order of authority between Adam and Eve. The serpent goes to Eve, not Adam. Now, Adam was created first, and the sources consistently point out he had the primary job. Guard the garden, protect God's word.
So bypassing Adam is like finding the weak point in the defense.
Kind of, yeah. It ignores the primary authority figure. And what makes Adam's role here even more striking is the strong suggestion from some sources that he was probably standing right there with Eve the whole time.
Wow. So he was present, but silent, passive.
Seems like it. He didn't step in, didn't defend his wife, didn't defend God's command, which leads straight into the third reversal, the one that really kicks off the rebellion. The serpent questioning God's word itself. Did God actually say?
Planting that seed of doubt. Maybe God isn't being entirely generous. Maybe he's holding back something good.
Exactly that. And right in that moment of uncertainty, Eve, she kind of makes it worse, doesn't she? When she repeats the command, she adds something God didn't say. Neither shall you touch it.
Oh, right.
So she puts her own interpretation, her own words, basically on the same level as God's command.
Mhm.
It shows human judgment starting to feel equal to divine authority. God's truth wasn't quite enough.
And that just opens the floodgates for the serpent's final attack on God's character.
Yeah, the double punch. First, attack the promise. You will not surely die. Flat out contradiction. Then attack God's preeminence. You will be like God, knowing good and evil.
The implication being God's lying to keep you down. He doesn't want you to be like him.
Pretty much. And that leads us right to verse 6. The climax, the moment of rebellion. They take the fruit. What does that act really signify?
It's the moment they fire God, essentially.
Haha. Yeah, that's one way to put it. They dethrone their creator. They elevate themselves to be the judges of right and wrong, good and evil, deciding for themselves what's best. It's a fundamental rejection of God's word as the ultimate authority. Humans over God.
And then, the final twist, the last reversal in that sequence. Eve gives the fruit to Adam. She leads him into it.
Mm-hmm. The one who should have been protected ends up leading the protector into the rebellion. The whole created order is now completely upside down.
Which inevitably brings us to the consequences, the reckoning.
Accountability time.
So after the act, God comes looking, walks in the garden, and he calls out to Adam first. Where are you? Why Adam specifically?
Well, the sources are pretty unified on this. Adam had the primary responsibility because of his role. He's often described in the sources as the representative head, or sometimes the term used as the federal head of humanity.
Okay, hold on. Federal head, that sounds kind of technical, but it feels really important. Can we unpack that a bit? It's not just that Adam was responsible for himself, is it? How does that connect to, well, to everyone else?
Right, it's crucial. Think of it like this. Adam was appointed as the representative for the entire human race, like a delegate. If he had obeyed under this view, his obedience would have counted, in a sense, for all humanity that came from him.
Oh, okay.
So the flip side is when he, as the representative, disobeyed, his failure also counted for humanity. He was the one entrusted with upholding the covenant, so when he broke it, the consequences ripple out to everyone in his line.
That makes his silence earlier when Eve was talking to the serpent just devastatingly significant.
It really does. But when God calls him out, what happens? Does he take responsibility?
Not even close. The blame game starts instantly.
Oh, yeah. Classic move. Adam points the finger straight at Eve, but he doesn't even stop there, does he?
No. He goes further, blaming God himself.
Yeah.
The woman you gave to be with me. I mean, the nerve.
It's quite something. Blame the wife, then blame the one who gave him the wife. Masterful deflection, you could say.
And Eve. She picks up the baton.
She follows the pattern, blames the serpent, an animal she was supposed to have dominion over. The whole chain of command, responsibility, trust, it's just shattered.
Leading directly to the fallout.
Yeah.
The 3 sets of consequences.
Yeah. Let's walk through them. First, the serpent.
Okay.
Cursed. Lowest of the animals, crawling on its belly, eating dust. It's a picture of total degradation and defeat.
And for Eve.
For Eve, pain in childbearing, which was meant to be a blessing, and relational strife, that difficult phrase. Your desire shall be contrary to your husband, but he shall rule over you. Conflict introduced into the core human relationship.
And finally, Adam. His consequence.
Work itself, which was part of the original good design, now becomes toil, agony, by the sweat of your face, the text says. And the ground itself fights back cursed, bringing thorns and thistles.
So creation itself is fractured by this.
Yes. And the ultimate consequence, the big one introduced here, death. Spiritual separation from God happens immediately. Physical death becomes the eventual end, returning to the dust.
It sounds utterly bleak, just judgment and loss. Yet you said grace appears right away, even in the curses.
It does. It's amazing, really.
Ah.
The first glimmer of hope is actually embedded within the curse pronounced on the serpent.
Genesis 3.15.
Exactly. Genesis 3.15. Known for centuries as the proto-evangelium, which just means...
The first gospel. First good news.
Yeah, the first hint of the good news. God promises this ongoing conflict, this enmity between the serpent's offspring and the woman's offspring, but he specifies a singular offspring of the woman.
Okay, let's pause there because this feels foundational. A singular offspring. What's the promise attached to this individual?
The promise is victory. This offspring, who Christians understand to be the Messiah, Jesus will deliver a decisive, fatal blow to the serpent's head. He'll crush the enemy.
Even though the serpent will strike back.
Yes, the prophecy says the serpent will strike his heel a wound, painful but not fatal, compared to the head-crushing blow.
Yeah.
So right there, in the darkest moment, God plants the seed of ultimate hope and resolution.
Wow. Okay, so the story isn't just about the fall. It immediately points towards recovery.
It does, and we see that hope reflected in Adam's next action, and then God's direct intervention.
Adam naming his wife Eve.
Right. He names her Eve, meaning mother of all living, after the curse of death has been pronounced, but before she's actually had any children. It shows he heard that promise in 3.15 and believed somehow life would continue, that the offspring would come.
He clung to the hope.
He did. And then God acts with just stunning grace. Remember Adam and Eve tried to cover their shame with fig leaves?
Yeah, their own solution probably didn't work too well.
Not for the kind of shame they felt. It was a human fix for a God-sized problem. So what does God do?
He provides clothes, garments of skin.
Garments of skin. And think about what that means. Where do skins come from?
An animal had to die.
An animal had to die. Blood had to be shed. The sources stress this. The very first sacrifice in the Bible wasn't made by humans trying to appease God. It was made by God himself to provide a covering for human sin and shame.
That sets a massive precedent, doesn't it? The need for a substitute, a covering provided by God.
Fundamentally, it points towards everything that follows. But even with this covering, there's still a consequence of separation. They can't stay in the garden, they're expelled, and cherubim angels guard the way back to the tree of life. Now, this sounds purely like punishment, right? The final boot out the door.
That's usually how it's seen, yeah. The ultimate loss.
It is loss, it is a consequence, but The sources really push us to see it also as an act of, believe it or not, protection, an act of mercy.
Protection. How so? Protection from what?
From two things, primarily. First, think about God's holiness. Now that humanity is sinful, unholy, direct contact with God's pure holiness is, well, dangerous. Some sources use language like it would consume them. Separation protects them from that immediate danger.
Okay, that makes a kind of sense. What's the second protection?
Protection from something maybe even worse, eternal suffering in their fallen state. Imagine if, after sinning, filled with shame, guilt, relational conflict, physical decay starting, imagine if they could still walk over and eat from the tree of life.
They'd live forever like that.
Exactly. Living forever in that broken, separated, suffering condition. The expulsion, blocking access to the tree of life, prevents that horrifying outcome. It prevents eternalizing the suffering.
So the separation, while painful, is actually God limiting the damage, containing the catastrophe out of mercy.
That's how these sources frame it. It's a profound containment strategy, driven by mercy even within judgment.
Okay, let's pull the lens back, the big picture. We're obviously still living in the world shaped by this event. The sources list the ongoing consequences: spiritually dead, children of wrath, darkened hearts without hope. We see the brokenness. Which brings up that huge philosophical question. Did humanity just mess up God's plan? Was this a giant cosmic mistake, or somehow was the fall itself part of the plan?
That is the central tension, isn't it? How do you reconcile a good God with this catastrophic event?
Yeah. How do the sources handle that? If it was part of the plan, does that make God responsible for the evil?
The sources generally conclude the fall wasn't plan B. It was, in a way, the necessary setup for the Great Resolution.
Like, you need the conflict to make the story work, to show the hero's true character.
Kind of. Think about it. The fall, this deep darkness, becomes the backdrop against which God's character can be displayed in ways it otherwise couldn't. Its primary role, ultimately, is to magnify God's greatness.
How so? Magnify what aspects of his greatness?
Well, his glory, especially attributes like mercy, grace, forgiveness, patience, these things shine brightest against the backdrop of sin and rebellion, don't they? The fall creates the conditions for humanity to experience these facets of God's character firsthand. His forbearance with enemies, his redeeming love.
And since the original design was for us to reflect God, to image him, experiencing those things allows us to reflect them back.
Precisely. How can you truly reflect forgiveness if you've never needed or received forgiveness? How can you model grace if grace was never necessary? The sources argue the fall, paradoxically, allows redeemed humanity to image God in a greater way than might have been possible in a world without that brokenness and redemption. It lets us know God more deeply.
That's a lot to take in, but it ties it together. We started with sin as this total rebellion, this reversal of God's perfect order, where humans tried to take the throne. But we end seeing that even in that moment of failure and judgment, God immediately embeds hope, that first promise, the proto-evangelium, setting the stage for the whole redemption story to come.
The problem is defined. We know what went wrong, and the solution, however faintly, is already hinted at.
So as we wrap up, here's that final thought for you, the listener, to chew on. If our ultimate purpose involves reflecting God's image, how might your own experiences of struggle, failure, or pain, the very real fallout of the fall in your life, actually be equipping you uniquely to show aspects of God's character, like grace or forgiveness or resilience, to others in ways you couldn't possibly manage in a perfect, struggle-free world? Just something to ponder until our next deep dive.